This one's for all my TV lovers. My Entertainment from DirecTV gets you 60-plus channels and Disney+, Hulu, and HBO Max all in one pack. But here's the thing. With so much great TV in My Entertainment, you're going to want to talk about everything you've been watching. Just remember that your friends might not be as well watched as you. Don't be a spoiler and encourage them to get My Entertainment for just $34.99 a month. Go to directtv.com/genre packs and sign up today. New customers only. Service renews monthly unless canceled. Credit card required. Conditions apply to apps. HBO Max Basic with ads begins after DirecTV 5-day trial. Learn more at directtv.com. Restrictions apply.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
Welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. I'm very honoured today to be joined by Mireille Gagné, author from Quebec in Canada, whose novel Horsefly we're going to talk about today. It has drawn from a kind of very hidden World War II past, a very dark aspect of Allied war work, shall we say, in biological warfare, and has a kind of contemporary relevance in the moment we're in here in the 21st century. I mean, I don't want to tell the story, give the plot away too much, but I think there's a huge amount to talk about in the novel that we'll explore today. So firstly, Mireille, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And welcome.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here today.
Good. So you are the novel is set in Quebec, the kind of the French language part of Canada, which we have to kind of do a deep dive back into the 7 Years' War to explain that one. But it's when kind of Canada is in the news, and when the world focuses on Canada, as it has been due to the kind of the various sort of kind of disputes with Trump in the last year, for example, Quebec rarely gets talked about. But there is a kind of there is a kind of a very, very powerful it has this very powerful kind of identity that is kind of unique to that part of the world. Is the setting? I mean, is the setting of the novel in Quebec? Obviously, this is where you live and it's what you know. Is the book kind of uniquely about this kind of sort of separate part of kind of Canadian identity? Would you say?
In literature in Canada, there's really a wall between the English literature and the French literature. as I said, it's not really often that a book is translated in the Canada in the English part. So I think we have a strong identity. First, because we don't speak the same language, and second, because we have our own culture, and we need to go back in time, like in the 17th century, and where everything 17th century, where everything started with the English versus the French, but I think with the last event, just some story about that, but with the Trump administration and everything, we never feel as together at the Canada. Even the French Canadian in Quebec, we have been talking about that we are proud to be Canadian. It was really happening in the last couple of months that we were happy to be Canadian, to stood in front of the USA. A lot of people I know just stopped to go to the USA. It's kind of going softly now, 2 years after. So people start to again continue to go to the United States, but.
I've been long of the view that when the Trump era finally ends, one of the places that will have been most transformed by it will be Canada. In all sorts of ways, mainly good, I think, but everything is a mixed bag. But I find it fascinating to hear what you're saying about this kind of interior sense of Canadian unity and national identity. And whenever you look at how national identities are born and develop and grow and change, often it is to do with how people within a particular nation state look at kind of external predators, basically, and think, I think we might be better off together. You never know.
We better, that's the thing. But we are complex. Because Alberta, one of our province, is talking to get separate from Canada right now, and we are between two governments in the provincial in Quebec, and there's a party who's talking more about independence as well. So we are contradictory.
Sure.
We are the opposite now. We are split in a lot of thinking about what's happening in the world, what's happening inside, and with the culture. And with immigration, we have a lot of immigration as well in Quebec, and there's a lot of discussion about that as in other countries. I know I read about the world news, but it's complicated, I think, to be part of a country, but to have his own identity. So. It's and in history, in my book, in the research I've made, we were not in the strong position. The Second World War, we were helping, the people at the war in Europe, but we were allied. But we were not the strongest one. We were stable. We were giving cattle, and we were giving food for. But it's kind of interesting that they approach us to. I'm talking about the novel, but they approach us to have the island, the Grosse Île Island, that we will talk later on, but. It was kind of dangerous that they choose to that island to be the top secret laboratory. It's kind of interesting, the position of Canada. I don't think we have been that strong from the past year, but we're feeling with the United States around us, and they want to buy us. They want to be us to be the 51st. Not État, I don't know how you say that in English. État, states. They want us to be the 51st states, and they want to expand and everything. So I think we're getting stronger now. Yeah.
So to look at the book, so to not to kind of spoiler it, but part of the book is, or the kind of the historical basis of the book is a real story about how there was a biological warfare laboratory set up quite near, I believe, quite near to where you live, on an island in Quebec during the Second World War. Now, every combatant nation in the Second World War was experimenting with biological germ warfare at the time. And all the other kind of weapons of mass destruction. So I guess, firstly, was this, I mean, do you know, was this the only place of its kind in Canada, or were there other places like that?
I heard on my research that after the Grosse Île, they started to make some experiment in Alberta in Canada as well. But they stopped it really fast because it was judged too dangerous. And before the Grosse Île, there was also, I don't know if you know that, but I learned that with my researches. But you had in UK a laboratory as well, and you had some experiment at the Gruinard Island with anthrax. It all started there. You know, we were having the government, the Britain, the American, and the Canadian were looking for a place to make some experimentation. And I just want to look at the same time. Sorry, I have some notes that I will try not to read, but you know, I want to be prepared for this interview. But so in 1942, Britain established a secret laboratory at Porton Down, near London. So I'm sure, I don't know if you knew that part of your history, but I learned that it was at the beginning, you know, or the research before that they create the top secret laboratory on Grosse Île. So the scientists worked on anthrax research and developed plan to spread disease through livestock. And this operation was called Operation Vegetarian. I find it really funny because it was with cattle. So they test anthrax in Scotland on Gruinard Island, and they detonate an explosive device containing anthrax spores over the island, and a cloud spread across it, and all the animals, the sheep, the cattle, the horses that had been placed there for the test began dying within a few days. And we remember that anthrax was chosen at that time because it was very stable, you know, extremely resistant and deadly. So the bacteria can form a spore in itself, and it can survive, what I found with my researchers, until 100 years, you know. So that's why it was interesting in that book that we are in 2026. And it happened in 1942. So it's still, the anthrax spore could still be alive right now, and even where they put it. So I think that was the right timing to write the book. So so, and on the Gruinard Island, they tried to clean it like a couple of times. So I heard that they burned the land in the 1980s. They tried a large decontamination by spraying a powerful disinfectant and removing contaminated soil. But only the island was safe again in 1980. So they rapidly stopped, you know, the experiment, and they needed to find another place. And it's where Grosse Île name came up, because a couple of years before, they wanted to use the Grosse Île as a prison. And they talk about that because the island is quite small, and you can separate the island in two. And it served during the 19th century for the quarantine. You know, when the people were coming back from Europe to Canada, they needed to stop in quarantine in the Grosse Île Island. and a lot of people die, unfortunately, there. But they could live. You know, the island was separated in two, and there were still islander on the east part of the island, and on the other part they were like the immigrant who were in quarantine. So they knew that the island was quite of practical for this kind of research. They can split it in both, and you know, put some laboratory on the west side, and there were still some houses with Islander, you know, Islander on the west part of the island. So
Right.
they knew that it was a good island for that kind of research, although it was 6 kilometers from the mainland, you know. And what they learned about the Gruinard Island was that it was too close to each other. But you know, on the Gruinard Island, they were kind of exploding anthrax bombs. So it was not the same thing, because in the Grosse Île Island, they wanted to produce anthrax. And they wanted to produce anthrax like 1,500 bombs by week. It was like incredible, the number of bombs they wanted to create. Mm-hmm. And with the research I've made, I learned that they produce enough anthrax to kill 30 times the worldwide population at that time. But only 5,000 bombs were sent to the Brighton, and they never use it, you know, because they changed their mind, and you know, the nuclear weapons started to get their way in, and you know, so
was the plan to, you know, if Germany, for example, couldn't be defeated by conventional means, this was the kind of the backup plan, biological.
Yeah. You know, the Canadian, the Brighton, and the American thought that German were really far away in the biological warfare than they really were. Accordingly to my research, Hitler didn't want to go in that kind of war. He was scared about this kind of weapons. Yes. So the Allies thought they were going really far away in that. It's the principal reason why they choose to work on these kind of weapon. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of crazy that they chose the Grosse Île Island, you know? It's a small island, and the thing that astonished me the most is they needed help, you know? There were 30 scientists on the island. There were 100 military, and they needed help from men and women working on the other island. So that's where I heard this story about Grosse Île. I was born on the Smile Island, the Île-aux-Grues Island, in the archipelago of 20 islands, and some people living on the Île-aux-Grues were asked to help in the laboratory. So the laboratory was from 1942 to 1956, and it continues after until the 70s. But it was only for cattle. You know, they were trying to work on vaccine and everything. It was still kind of secret, but it was not top secret with the army. And so that's where they started to work on produce anthrax. But the thing is the anthrax, and they were also working on rinderpest vaccine. They thought that the German would attack like the Canada with the cattle. So they wanted to work on vaccine, even though if it was not their plan, but they thought it was their plan. So they were working on two laboratories. They were the Project M for anthrax and the Project R for rinderpest vaccine. So the islands was separated in two laboratories. Yeah.
And the fact that this is done in French Canada, I mean, obviously, France itself during the Second World War is kind of divided. There are the Free French and the Vichy French, and there is essentially a civil war being fought in France at the same time as the Second World War. And I would imagine French-Canadian loyalties are, there are also probably all sorts of different loyalties at play there at the time. But was there something kind of almost colonial about the decision to place this really dangerous laboratory in French Canada? And if you think, I suppose the other question is beyond that, what are the effects also on Indigenous Canadians, native peoples? Firstly, how did French Canada feel about this installation being there?
You've never been one to settle. Stand down or stand still. You're a lifelong learner, energized by excellence. There's a fire inside you you can't ignore. You've got competition to outrun, momentum to build on, and your own high standards to meet. Stop now? Not a chance. At Capella University, we help you catch what you're chasing because you've always had the drive. Now, go earn the degree. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
You've got social dialed in. Search is doing its thing. So why do your marketing results look the same as 6 months ago? That's because you're fishing in the same pond as everyone else. Podcast listeners are a different audience entirely. More engaged, harder to reach through traditional channels, and ready to act when someone they trust makes a recommendation. We're Acast, and we put them right in front of you. Browse thousands of the world's leading podcasts, book host reads or run your own ads, and track every conversion in real time. Same skills you already have, brand new results. Acast. Acast.com/advertise.
In fact, they didn't know. Even the Prime Minister in Canada, Mackenzie King, was not that much interested about that story. It was more American with Brighton, but they were like scientists. We push a lot to make that happen. Banting, the one who worked on penicillin, and he has a Nobel Prize about his research. So that's one of the Canadians who tried to push as much as he could, because he wanted to create a weapon that would stop the Second World War. So in 1942, he even fly a couple of times to Brighton to speak to the authority to push like this kind of
much like Robert Oppenheimer. The create Oppenheimer and people like him, their great dilemma was, well, who gets the atomic bomb? Is it us or is it fascism? And it looked like, actually the Germans were not quite as far down the road as the Allies were anyway, but it's a great moral dilemma of this terrible thing.
Yes. And, Frederick Banting, he helped save millions of lives with penicillin, and he was the one who were reaching the American, the Brighton, to get like a laboratory. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, he died on a plane crash going to Brighton to continue his research. But then some other Canadian scientists continue to make it strong and to I don't know how to say that in English. They work really hard to have Grosse Île became a laboratory, a secret laboratory, and all the stories that I heard, because the research about that was done by two Quebecer journalists who make really a good job. about the laboratory. They made a documentary only in French, but you can subtitle, and it's called Project M. And they just launched a book in French as well a couple of weeks ago about all that story. But they focus the history about the military and the scientists who were there. But when I found that documentary, I found it really interesting because I heard story when I was young. You know, the people were working there on the island and they were top secret. They were doing their quarantine. I heard that when I was a kid, and I always thought this story was really, really interesting for me. And my mom, she arrived on the island in the 70s, and you know, she has a new look about that story, and she tried to ask some people some question about that, and nobody wanted to answer the question, because that's what I said a little bit earlier, but they needed to have some cheap labor, you know, to work on the laboratory. So they asked some people from the island where I was born to help them to take care of the cattle, to kill the cattle, to bring back the cattle and the organs to the scientists to help them to create the vaccine. They were like washing their body with like a red soap. They all told me that about that, the red soap that hurts their skin so bad. And you know, they were not that much educated on this island. You stop going to school really soon.
They have no idea of the risks.
Idea, yeah, and even I learned that I suppose that there's one man who helped the military to get rid of all the anthrax in the St. Lawrence River. They put that in tunnel, and they put it back on, like in the St. Lawrence River, you know. And they didn't know, even they were taking some scientists to get the anthrax spore tested in United States. So they put them in a canoe, and you know, they were transporting anthrax. They were working with like bacteria, the most dangerous bacteria and viruses around the world, you know, because the scientists were going to get some bacteria.
Summer weekends are all about family, sunshine, and making memories together. Before everyone arrives, I stop by my local Total Wine & More to pick up a great bottle. Maybe a favorite we already love, or something new to enjoy with dinner on the patio. Find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly. Must be 21.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Some viruses around the world, even in India, you know, to get like the strongest viruses thing. And they were working on that, and they didn't know. The military asked them to to keep quiet. And until the end, almost all of these men didn't say a word before to die. But when I started to write the book, unfortunately, there were not a lot of men and women still living that were working on the island. And the one that were still alive were really old. And when I tried to ask their children if I could ask them some question, they all said no. They didn't want them to bring back their memory, because I think they knew that if they didn't say anything about what happened there, they were not feeling good or great about what happened. You know, they helped to do something that they didn't agree at all. So I tried to ask the grandchildren, you know, and that's where the magic happened, because the grandchildren, they heard kind of some sentences, some stories about the grandfather, and even they didn't know if it was real or not. A lot of people I asked, I interviewed, they told me, I thought it was like Alzheimer of dementia, you know, when they told me some kind of story happened during that time. And that's where I started to write the book in my head. I said, okay, there will be a man with dementia, and his grandchildren will don't know if it's true or not, and he will try to get to the sources and try to discover what happened on this island. And the documentary that was made by the two journalists were mostly with, I said, like the scientists and the military, but they didn't ask all this question to the relative, that work on that. And a lot of people, even after the launch of the book, I receive a lot of social media messages of people say, my uncle was a doctor on that island, the Second World War. And he told me just before to die, the shame that he felt about that story. And even we saw that in the movie of Oppenheimer, but the army always try to separate the people, to like morcelate the story, that you don't have like the full view of what happened. And I suppose that's what they did, in the laboratory. They split the laboratory. They didn't want the scientists to speak to each other. They didn't want like the worker to know what's going on. So there was like a kind of like really secret around the Grosse Île, and even on the mainland. I heard some story that the people were scared when the military, because they were French military going on the island, and when they come back on the mainland, they didn't want to touch them. They didn't want, because they knew that something was going on, but they didn't know what really was going on.
Yeah.
And that, and I when I started to ask the grandchildren, and it's where I told myself, okay, I think I have something there. But it was hard. It was really hard. A lot of people, the number of interview I tried to organize, and everybody was canceling last minute, because they didn't want, they were scared, they didn't want their name written. I needed to change all the name in the story, because I know who put the anthrax in the St. Lawrence River, but I don't want to put that weight on the family, because they still exist. And I know the people, because we were all living in the same islands together, and so that's such an interesting story. Yeah.
So let's just give a brief plug for the book. So it's called Horsefly, and currently it's being translated from French into English. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, super. And currently available in all good bookshops.
Yeah, it will. The UK version is going to be launched like in a couple of days. Okay. Because it's a new cross press, a new editor in London that will launch the book. So they're doing like the marketing right now. So I'm seeing a lot of my horsefly flying, and I find it funny because it's a heat wave in London as the book starts. It's a huge heat wave in Quebec. And there's a lot of flies, going on, and people get angry against each other because of the heat, because of the fly, So I find it funny, like that it's happened during the heat wave.
So the book, if you can, as we always say on the podcast, please, if you want to get a copy, get it from your local independent bookseller, not from the big retailer of whom we shall speak nothing. Or if you can't get it from your local bookseller, go directly to the publisher, and they'll sell you a copy there, because once all that infrastructure's gone, it's not coming back. Mireille, we'll say farewell, but thank you so much for your time today. It's a fascinating look at a secret history, a very, very dark secret history, and it just reminds us that all sides in the Second World War, the notionally good guys and the bad, had these sorts of plans, and had this capacity for destructiveness. Mireille, it would be a pleasure to talk to you further about Quebec, biological warfare, Canada, and everything in between. If you'd like to come back one time, it'd be a great to continue the conversation if you do have the time.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope I was understandable. I was understood, sorry. sometimes
impeccable English. Honestly, you should be proud. You should be proud.
Okay, thank you.
We'll leave you there. Take good care now.
Thank
All
you.
the
You
best.
too.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Did you know riders who switch and save with Progressive save nearly $200 per year? That's a whole new pair of riding gloves, and more. Quote today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $197 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between October 2024 and September 2025. Potential savings will vary.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.